Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Dean's Chat, where we discuss all things podiatric medicine. My name is Dr. Jeffrey Jensen. I'm the Dean at the Arizona College of Podiatric Medicine and the host for the Dean's Chat podcast. Joanna's off this week, so it's going to be me and our wonderful guest. I'd like to introduce Dr. Allan Freedline to Dean's Chat.
Thank you for having me. Super excited to be here. I've been looking forward to it.
Gosh, I've been looking forward to it too. It's probably long overdue. We're fairly informal on Dean's Chat, Dr. Freedline. Is it okay with you if we go first names, Allan and Jeff?
Absolutely. It's much better than what I'm called at home.
Oh, well, there you go. That could be another sideline for the discussion today. So I'd like to give you a little more formal introduction because you've got a very unique history in terms of being a podiatrist. You didn't exactly, as we talked about earlier, stay in your lane, right? You've been out and about doing things. So in 1996, 6 years after graduating from podiatry school and 4 years after finishing your surgical training, you pivoted at that point into a senior executive role at Smith & Nephew, which is a large company with lots of background, which we will discuss. You spent the last almost 3 decades driving innovations and acquisitions for Smith & Nephew. You've held key roles in medical education, strategy development, technology scouting, business development. In fact, with the different businesses you've assessed, I believe you said it's turned into almost $1.6 billion in acquisitions for Smith & Nephew. You've also been a designer and you've patented a medical device, and you were also on the design team for the single disposable negative pressure device. We have got a lot to talk about today. Allan, let's get started. I talk to my students, I talk to potential students, residents. A lot of them want to know how to get a foot in the door consulting with companies, or in your case, you dove in head first. How'd you make that transition in 1996?
Yeah, so it didn't start in 1996, and I think that's one of the key points. I was doing consulting prior to that. So it's a walk before you run type of, relationship. And really what excited me about being on, your show and your program is not to tell my story about me. It's really to help others wherever they are in their professional life. And it should start as a student. That's where it started for me. But wherever you are, if you want to do more, and I can't talk to you about surgical correction of the ankle. That's not me, right? But I can talk to you about how do you expand some of those opportunities that make life a little bit more interesting. Maybe you want to go on speaking engagements. Maybe you want to do posters. Maybe you want to help do certain things. We can get into it for companies. And certainly I know medical device more than pharma. But I'm hoping that that's what I can accomplish here. And I've always loved educating. When I was a resident at the VA in Miami, I loved educating the students that would come through. I was a senior resident, loved educating the junior residents. And then, as we all know, when you're out in podiatry practice, you're educating. Who are you educating? You're educating doctors who refer patients to you. You're educating the patients. You're educating the family members, the home health agencies that you might be working with. If you're going into skilled nursing, if you're in hospitals, it goes on and on and on. So we as podiatrists are definitely educators. Whether you feel comfortable in that role or not is hopefully something I can remind us that we are. So you asked, how did it get started? The first way it started was as a student. I used to go, so I went to Barry University. I was in the second class going through, and they had this thing, the Florida Podiatric Medical Association meeting in Orlando once a year. Students could go. So we went. And we walked around to see what was happening, and we saw the different booths, and we spoke to the different companies. And one company in particular, and it happened to be the Smith & Nephew rep, they were like, well, there's this new thing, moist wound healing. Would you be interested in learning? And it wasn't to me, it was to the people I was with. And then the company allowed the rep to come to the school and teach us students about moist wound healing. And that's a big deal. Because reps, they have a job to do and they're out, and we didn't really represent a viable account. So the fact that he was allowed and she, I remember their names, and I'm still in touch with one of them today, all these years later. So the first step is start by knowing who your local reps are. And that is really a critical point. How do you treat them? Do you treat them like they're an annoyance, right? I don't have time for them. Or do you treat them like they actually have a lot of valuable information and I want to make time for them and I want to learn about them? And how do they even become a medical device rep or pharmaceutical rep? So that was my first role, is getting involved with the company through the rep, letting the reps know what we did. And then we were putting on some local educational wound care conferences for accreditation. So we had little tabletop booths. And then, of course, they came and they set up. So I would learn the companies there. And before you know it, you sort of leap from the salespeople to maybe the senior salespeople, and then into the marketing people, and then the senior people at the company. So you start to have a relationship and you start to get to know them. They get to know you. They know what you're interested in, how you might help them. Many times they wouldn't necessarily think a doctor would be interested in leaving practice. You've gone through school and residency, and why would you leave practice? But actually, I come from a small business background and I enjoy new challenges and innovation. And that's where I like to go. So that's how I initially got in, by doing educational programs for Smith and Nephew. I built the very first websites for wound care. So that's a whole nother thing, because I had a background in video production. I had a background in software development. And then this thing, the internet, came up and I saw people had websites and I thought, well, if they could do it, I can do it. And I started to learn HTML programming and I built the first website. And with that, Smith and Nephew and Convatec was a division of Bristol Myers at the time. They invited me to please come and build their very first websites. So I opened up a small little consulting company and I said, okay, since I know medicine and I know wound care and I know how to do internet sites, because you've seen my internet site, it makes sense that I can just do this for you. And they were like, yes, of course. So
what year was that, Al?
Oh, don't make me date myself. It had to be 1994, 95, around there.
Yeah. Because if you remember back then, I was doing those educational workshops, 3-day workshops for Smith and Nephew at my practice in Denver when I was working with Gary Mulder. But Smith and Nephew and Convatec, they were right on the cutting edge on things. So I didn't mean to cut you off. Go on. Yeah. I love it.
So that's sort of my story about the things that I did before. And that's really what I wanted to kind of remind people about is, you've done so much before you went to podiatry school, and I'm sure you have a very interesting background and things you can do. And especially this generation, what they can do with computers and AI, so I just sort of say, well, look what I did with traditional multimedia, because I knew video production and a little bit of software development. Look what I did. Right. Boy, what they can do is light years ahead.
So when you were initially working with Smith and Nephew and Convatec and other wound care companies, did they want you to use their products first? Were you using their products to give them ideas or anything? Not really.
No, I knew the space. I knew the products that were out there. The reps were always very honest, where they would say, at the time, we have a limited portfolio. A wound that you're treating will evolve to a point where our technology is the right technology for it. But if it's not, we will tell you it's not, and we will point you in the direction of the technology that's probably better suited for your patient and for that wound. And that's what I grew up in. I grew up in people and companies that were like that and would advise you on that.
So in getting into the medical device space, you and I were talking earlier, and you referenced the lecture you gave recently where you put a picture up of an operating room. And would you share that story? Because that might be a good launching point to talk about medical devices in the medical.
Yeah, I was invited by the University of Miami. They have a healthcare marketing program to the undergrads. And they have senior undergrads and also junior undergrads who are taking it. And really, I think a lot of what the programming teaches them is about being in the industry that provides the care to the patient, right? The healthcare system. So I came at it from a different angle, which is medical devices. So they thought, oh, okay, maybe you should talk to these students. So open up their eyes about what opportunities there are there. So I put together a presentation, and I really do like educating. So I was very excited about meeting up with them, and they were very, very interested in it. And one of the first slides I had was sort of either it was an emergency room, basically it was a setup like that. And I show them the emergency room and there's people and there's all sorts of equipment. And then the next slide that I advance is the exact same picture with red dots all over everything that's a medical device. And my point was saying, other than people and furniture, pretty much everything else in there is a medical device. So even if you are not interested in medical devices, if you are on the healthcare delivery side, please be appreciative of all of those companies that are out there with medical devices, because if it weren't for them, you'd have an empty room. I don't know what service you'd be providing if you didn't have pharmaceuticals and medical devices. So with that, they kind of sat up and they had we had a nice back and forth.
Isn't that interesting? And it just goes to show you how times have changed. I mean, they say that, sometimes things don't change, but the technology that we're dealing with today, you cannot put a blind eye to the outside world. You can't live in a bubble or a cocoon because there's so much out there. Can I shift gears a little bit to your roles at Smith and Nephew? So education is in your core. I get that. And that's so important because new products require new educational opportunities for healthcare providers and patients alike. But you also talked about strategy development. Strategy is always an interesting thing to me because we have all of our accreditation documents and our strategic plans. What does strategy development look like in the medical device world?
So, obviously, without giving up too much, and I was part of non-disclosure agreements, so I can just say, we all know the companies that are out there and the products that they have today. And then at some point in the future, they will have new products. And it doesn't necessarily mean just a newer version of something. It could be something very different in terms of technology. It could be an adjacent space that a technology company wants to move into. So strategy is sort of looking at where is the business going to be in a few years and what are the things you need to put in place now? Because those things don't happen quickly. They take a long time and they can take a lot of money and a lot of resource. So when do you start? How do you make that decision? And those were the kind of conversations that you have. And there is no right and wrong. And I wish somebody had a crystal ball. There just isn't that. There is information. And the more information you gather and the more opportunities that are out there that are right for the organization that you're a part of, right? Not every organization can take on every opportunity, and some are better than others for that organization. So my joke would always be, we're not going to be in the car wash business. I'm sure it's a great business. It's not the right business for us. So that's an extreme, but it's just to the point of what do you get into?
What percentage of it is opportunistic, like it falls in your lap and you're like, oh my gosh, this is interesting, versus, like you said, a timeline of 2 to 3 years, where are we going? Is that a fair question?
Yeah, I think there's always a view of, where are you as a company? And are you a leader? Are you seen as the leader? And if not, are there technologies that, your customer base is using that you don't offer? So that might be something that's more nearer term. And then there's, where are things going? And do we need to be in there? A technology that I'm particularly interested in diving deep into is nitric oxide, which you and I spoke about a little bit. And, I'm just fascinated by it. And there are a lot of things about it that intrigue me and I think fit nicely with wound care. So, where is that going to be? Is that going to be something that in a few years' time is something that clinicians just say, oh, yeah, we use this type of technology?
Right. And not to get dive too deep into nitric oxide, but do you see it as a wound healing agent or an infection control agent, or both?
Well, from what I've learned so far about nitric oxide, and the people that sort of discovered it won the Nobel Prize in 1998. And there are a lot of things it can do. And some of them are vasodilation and antimicrobial, very potent. They do both, right? It does both, rather. Absolutely. So as a wound clinician,
goes away both ways.
What's important to us when we have a patient in front of us that may need a little bit of help, we don't want them to go the wrong direction. We want to see progress in the wound. Well, if I can do something to increase perfusion, if I can do something to make sure pathogens, biofilm is not an issue, I'm going to have a much easier road with that patient. That's my thinking.
No, I'm with you on that. So let me ask you this: if you in 2000, let's say, you had a crystal ball and you could foresee the next 25 years, what technologies have you seen in the wound care industry that have just been off the charts, that have been difference makers?
Yeah, that is a good question because I saw so many. But then the question becomes what finds its way into practice? What becomes standard of care, first line therapy, second line therapy? So I'd say there's a big gap between what we see and what is available and what finds its way into everyday use.
That's a good point.
And that if you try to untangle that, and you say, well, why is that? Well, it has to do with, in no particular order, usability. So the extreme example I give is, what if I have a great medicine, right, that you take by mouth, but it tastes terrible, and your target market is pediatrics, right? Trust me, this is a great medicine. Just take this horrible tasting medicine, right? That's difficult. Okay. So in medical devices, it's the same, right? How usable is it for whoever is designed to use it, right? That can get in the way, or that can facilitate it. So you might see something that comes by that isn't necessarily the greatest thing you've ever seen, but boy, does it hit all the other marks. It's usable, it works well, everyone's satisfied with it. So all of a sudden you start to get these Venn diagrams, right? That's the picture in my mind of what overlaps. Reimbursement, obviously, is a big one. It's the first question you often get. Is this reimbursed? So from a clinician end, I won't even consider it if it's not reimbursed. That becomes a barrier. Interestingly, that seems to have changed. With high deductible plans in the US, there's more of a willingness to say, I can offer something to my patient that isn't reimbursed, and there's a route for that. So, I'd say everything from, either it falls under the umbrella of a diagnostic or a detection. So we want to detect something. We want to know whether it's infected or not. Because if you go to conferences, you always hear wound infection. That's a clinical call. Well, does it always have to be? What if I have a remote patient, right? What if they're in COVID? How do I get there? So there's detection. There's other forms of treatments. There's prevention of the initial wound, prevention of recurrence of wounds. So I was very fortunate because Smith & Nephew had such a full portfolio. Everything came our way. I could see everything. And in fact, I was one of the people that looked at the Leaf device. Leaf is a sensor that goes on the patient's chest, and it's designed for patients that are in a facility to monitor their position in bed to, hopefully reduce or prevent facility-acquired pressure injuries. So there's a leap in technology of a sensor that provides data to help prevent a wound that, I was fortunate enough to go out to California and meet the people who worked on it. And they had a 1,000-patient study at Stanford that sort of proved its case. And then you bring that back. You talked about strategy, and you bring that back and you have the discussions of, is this a business that we can be in and that customers would be receptive of?
So what was it like in the Freedline household? When you come home from work at night and you're at the dinner table going, oh my God, there's new technology that passed over my desk today. Did you have a lot of those moments?
No. No, my parents for years, what do you do? We can't understand what you do. And I just gave up. So.
Oh, okay. All right. That makes sense. But you still, how about some other products that were like game changers for you, just off the top of your head?
What we've seen in the wound space, right, is when I came into the wound space, all the talk was living skin, right? That was the biologic. Not only was it going to make a huge impact in wound care, but in health. Right? We're going to grow new organs. This was the talk back
ears and things.
Yeah, in 2000. And then at the same time, what was also coming up and emerging? Negative pressure wound therapy. So you had those two therapies competing at the exact same time. Which would you have bet on at the time, right? So which one? The cool biotech living skin, or this other thing, which turned into negative pressure? So I guess I kind of look back of what's made it and what's made a difference, and the clinicians who go, I can't treat wounds without it. So I would look at negative pressure for that. I would look at, some of the more advanced technologies to treat difficult to heal wounds, pressure injury prevention, I would look at a lot of these, skin substitutes that have come out that clinicians say, I need this. I need this to help my patients. I mean, you can't avoid it. You look on LinkedIn. This is all that you read is don't take these away from me. So I'm not even talking about, well, does the science prove that? I'm just talking about the feedback from the clinicians who are treating the patients. And those are the ones that I've seen that you didn't necessarily have 20 years ago, and you do have them today, and people aren't willing to let them go. They'll fight for them.
Very good. This might be kind of overlap, or maybe we've covered it, but you had mentioned specifically technology scouting. Is that, that's your efforts to go out and maybe see something that's not obvious? Am I reading that right?
It's all encompassing. I guess it's an umbrella term. And I was lucky because people want to come to a big company that's in the space that's global with their technology. So there was a lot of that. There's a lot of people coming to us with, I have something that I think you'll be interested in. But then you go to a conference and people come to the booth with a similar type of message. Or the thing I always made time to do is go to the poster session and go up and down that poster session and look at the book for the conference first and see if they have a section, scan it. What are the titles of these posters? What are they talking about? To me, that was just a wonderful resource because not only is the information there, but the poster presenter is there. And I get to talk to a human about why did you do this? What did you find? What about this, that, or the other? I don't get that in a journal. Right? Although I look at journals and often I reach out to the author and they're very kind and we have a conversation about that. There's industry news reports that clinicians probably don't receive that I was receiving. University have licensing offices. So something that's been discovered or being worked on at an early stage in a university, they're looking to find an industry partner for that. That would be another source. So I don't know that I want to give specifics, but there were over 100 a year that we would look at and talk about and do various levels of, due diligence on, if you want to call it that. But the hard part is that a lot of them tell a compelling story, yes. Right? Look at this technology. Here's what it does. Here it's been used on actual wound patients who have failed the following well-known therapies. Our product was used and look at how the wound responded. And almost everything came with a similar story. So I don't doubt the stories. I believe the stories, but how you can't say yes to all of them. So how do you then pick? And that's the secret sauce that some of the companies have to go through. Of then how do we narrow things down?
And you've referenced the due diligence components. I mean, as we've been discussing, so I get that for sure. If you were talking to my students and they said, Dr. Freedline, which conferences should I go to in wound care? Could you just list a few that you would recommend?
Well, sure. I'll back it up. If they said, which conferences should I go to? My question is, what interests you? What's your background? What did you study in undergrad? Right? My son went to undergrad. He was a chemical engineer. And now he's a first-year student at University of Miami Med School. He's interested in certain things. So I start with, what are you interested in? Right. And it may not be wound care, and that's great. And it may not even be in the medical field. It may be something else. I used to go to technology shows all the time, but I saw things there that were inspirational and I would bring them into the medical field. So you can cross-pollinate very easily, but start with what interests you, because if you do that, then you'll be doing things that nobody else can do because you see things nobody else can actually see. Okay. So that's the first thing I would say is that when it comes to wound conferences, they can be overwhelming, right? You go, there's a million conferences, there's competing tracks, there's the poster session, there's the exhibit hall. What do I go? Where do I, so I would probably say start small. Go to something that's nearby that doesn't, you can hop in a car or some other transportation and get to, and start small. Call up the organizers, let them know I'm a student. Do you have a rate for me, right, to come in? Maybe, they might not, or maybe they say, yes, we do, but it's only the exhibit hall and it's only for one day. Do what you can. There's some big ones that are coming up. The SAWC is one that a lot of people know. But there are plenty of others. I just spoke recently at Desert Foot East. which I heard you on a previous, one of your programs talking about. I think you spoke at the Desert Foot West. So there's just so many that you can go to depending on which one you would like, which one's close, which one has things that interest you.
That makes sense. That makes perfect sense.
And when you go, have a goal. I would say have a goal. When you go there, I want to talk to a few companies. I want to talk to a few clinicians. I want to ask them about their experiences. Don't just go and say, I went. Have a piece of paper after you're done that if I were to talk to you about it and say, what did you learn? What'd you get out of it? Sorry, I catch up.
And nowadays, almost all the meetings have a wound care focus. Because I was specifically thinking about wound care, but the Symposium on Advanced Wound Care, this is coming up in Dallas, and then every year they have a fall symposium in Vegas, and that's probably a meeting of the minds, if you will. But there's lots of wound care meetings, and like you said, any meeting local. What's interesting about that, Allan? Somebody just willing to make a phone call is a tremendous differentiator. Because if a student calls me and says, oh, I'd like to go to this meeting and I see you're speaking, I'd be like, well, yeah, come on along, hang out, we'll figure it out. So you got to be willing to pick up the phone or send an email or something to make that introduction.
It's so true. And I don't know. I don't want to make a sweeping generalization, about just sort of technology and how it's easy to pick up a phone and send a text, send an email. And if that is your connection with people, you're missing a trick. Okay, because I will tell you that when I went to the University of Miami, I sat in the back of the room and the students came in and there was another presenter before me. So everyone that's coming in the room knows that I'm new, right? I shouldn't necessarily be there. There were about 2 or 3 people who came up to me and shook my hand and said, hey, how are you? Why are you here? Nice to have you. And then some of them have connected with me on LinkedIn. And one of them wants to go to medical school. And my son is first year medical school. And now they have been connected to talk through issues. And if you're not connecting with people, one of the most fascinating conversations that I had at Smith and Nephew, sitting around the table with senior executives, was this: what was your first job?
Fair.
You learn a lot about people. My first job was a pool boy. I cleaned pools in Miami Beach at the Fontainebleau Hilton. I picked up cigarette butts. I picked up dirty towels. I poured chlorine into the pool and ruined all my clothes. And other people have really interesting first jobs. And, it's just have a conversation with people.
You're bringing back a little PTSD because I was mowing grass around billboards and painting the back of the billboards gray.
It is the greatest question to start a conversation with, yes. Or at least when you know somebody, because it really, everyone generally will have, I was a hard worker. I was willing to roll up my sleeves and get the job done. And fine, now that you're a podiatrist, don't forget that part of you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I made a couple notes here. I want to make sure I discuss them with you. The cross-pollinization among industries always fascinates me because no matter where I go, I see something, I'm like, oh my God, that'd be kind of cool, in the OR or, make, some kind of cross-pollinization. What percentage of things that you see, even negative pressure was cross-pollinization. That
now
is probably the most common area.
Yeah, it's digital, right? There's going to be an AI session as the keynote, right, coming up at the wound conference.
Yeah.
So now we have smartphones with cameras, with software in the wound care space. Right. Okay, there you go. There's one big one. Certainly pharmaceuticals, there's been growth factors, PDGF, and it's used in a lot of places. And now it's in wound care, and it's been in wound care for a while. Biologics coming in that are used all over. Hernia meshes. Right? But boy, do you see them also in wound care. I'm sure I could rattle off many, but hydrogels, even you go to the most basic of things, you can find a lot of uses for hydrogels outside of wound care.
It's just incredible. We could talk about this for a while, but
I'll show you something. You mentioned something. I said I had a few show and tell, so I wanted to kind of bring this up. I don't know if you can see this, but that is a young me, maybe a little bit blurry, standing at a podium at a trade show. And there's 2 things I want to point out here. I don't know. Do you see these pink boxes?
Yeah.
Okay. So I went to technology conferences. What I saw at technology conferences were people using the exhibit booth as presentation vehicles. I brought that back to the folks at Smith and Nephew. And I said, this is what's happening. I think we should do this.
Yes.
And we were the first ones that ever, now you see everyone's doing it.
Little headset.
No, it was before headsets, and we got complaints from all the neighboring booths. We had a microphone and chairs, and nobody around liked it for obvious reasons. So then guess what happened at the new technology show I went to? I saw the wireless systems, brought it back. We should be doing this. So that's one. And then the other one was those pink boxes. That came from IBM. IBM at a technology show had those boxes where people would walk around and they put different things from the different booths in it. And it was a shipper. You could take it to the airport and ship it as luggage. So in the old days of the wound conferences, there'd be a lot of giveaways and you'd have too many. Well, people were walking around the airport with those pink boxes, which was our color. And then it was so much better than that, because then they would get back to their hospitals and our reps who didn't go to the show would go to see them and see the pink box. And that became a dialogue. Oh, you went to our booth, you went to the show. How did it go? And it became a major advertising vehicle by something I learned at a technology show that was successful. So,
right. Oh gosh, I love these kind of stories. That's fabulous. You had mentioned LinkedIn, and I wanted to spend some time talking with you about social media. It is ubiquitous, right? It's everywhere. I mean, even this podcast, when we load it up on a Tuesday and Friday morning, it goes to like 10 different places, right? Mm-hmm. Your thoughts for medical students, podiatry students, even undergrads in terms of connecting via social media and just the ins and outs and do's and don'ts. What are your thoughts?
It's imagine a world without it, and you read somebody's article and you want to reach out to them. You see somebody who spoke at an event. You want to reach out to them. You watch a video and they inspired you. How would you do it? LinkedIn is a wonderful tool. Now, it's a two-way street, right? You can reach out and try to connect with someone. It doesn't mean that they'll read it. It doesn't mean that they'll respond. If they do, then you want to be careful with their time and you want to have a goal. Why am I reaching out to you? I think it's fantastic. I think it's just a perfect way to reach out to people. And, out of 100 students or young podiatrists or even senior podiatrists, how many are going to do it? Very few. So you're going to stand out. That's the way I see it. That's the advice I give to my kids. One's in law school and one's in med school. So it's, get out there, meet people, shake hands.
We're in similar paths. I've got my son here. I'm in Lynchburg, Virginia. I'm going to do a podiatry program for undergrads and master's students, but my son's here in law school and my daughter starts dental school in the fall. So you and I are on the same track.
Yes, we are.
That's great. So I'm of the mindset that our students should all be on LinkedIn. To me, it's the easiest way to reach out and connect with people that, otherwise you'd have to wait till the next American College of Foot and Ankle Surgeons meeting to corner them somewhere and ask them a question. I mean, what a wonderful vehicle.
It is. It's fantastic. They find you, you find them. Something I've not gotten into, but I want to, is maybe writing some types of articles and post them on LinkedIn so people can read it and people go, oh, I'm interested in what you're talking about. So there are people out there that I don't know and don't know me and I'm welcome, them to connect with me and have a conversation and see where it goes. I think at my heart, I always want to try to help people. So if you reach out to me and you ask me for help, I'm going to say yes, and I'm going to see if I can help you in some way. Maybe it's just a piece of advice. Maybe it's a connection. That's the other thing about LinkedIn. You can go and you can have, 1,000 connections. It doesn't mean you really know those people, right? So often my first question is like, if I see that, oh, there's somebody I want to talk to, and Jeff, you know them. I see on LinkedIn you're connected. So do you really know them? And you might say, I don't really think so. I met them once. We connected on LinkedIn. So that's the other thing is to use it to leverage connections, but in a good way.
Right. Oh, yeah, it happens all the time. I mean, you and I, all of our communication getting ready for this podcast was via LinkedIn. And I'll bet a quarter of the invites that I put out for Dean's Chat are via LinkedIn because it's so easy, one recently, and hey, I've been meaning to get in touch with you. And, next thing you know, you're chatting and you exchanging phone numbers and emails. And next thing you know, you're doing a podcast. I mean, it's just fabulous.
Yeah. Well, I think you connected me, right? Recently.
I did.
Somebody. I had oh my God, what a crazy conversation. Somebody that's not in wound care, not in medicine, came across audio recordings, and I don't think it's a problem to say their names, right?
No, this is great. This is a fabulous story. Our audience will love it.
Yeah. Audio recordings from, I think, the 1960s of a Dr. Marvin Steinberg. Well, I know that name. Many of us know that name. And we know that John Steinberg, who recently was on a panel with, is his grandson. And I heard this totally disconnected story talk about networking and people of somebody just blurted out, well, I don't know if you know, but this is Dr. Marvin Steinberg. And he looked into this and I actually have a recording on him. I said, time out. You kidding me? Upload that. And I'm going to get in touch with John Steinberg so that he can hear this. If this is his grandfather, what better? So, I mean, these crazy uses of social media and LinkedIn.
It took about a minute, right? I got your message. Mm-hmm. I sent a quick message to John, connected you two. He sent you an email. Boom, done.
Right.
Oh my gosh. I can't wait to hear those, by the way.
I didn't hear them. I just knew they were uploaded and I made sure he had the link. And, you know, because let's say if it were my grandfather, what I wouldn't give.
Oh my gosh. I know he was just like, this is incredible, you know, kind of. Yeah. So, that's so fun. That's a classic example of the upside for sure. Any downsides to social media?
Absolutely. I think you have to be very careful of what you're posting. And I mean, coming from a corporate environment where I lived and worked for 29 years, you know, I was very focused. I certainly tried to be. I am here. We are all here because we have work. And that is what brings us together, right? You know, if you start to deviate and start to talk about other things, well, then you run some risks. Right. So why are you there and what is your focus? And, you know, if you're going to post things that are controversial, understand that that's going to have repercussions. I guess that's the best advice I can give, you know, and if you're, you know, young or more senior, you know, and it's there. What are you going to do?
I'm with you. It's there until you take it down. Hopefully you get to it before someone else does, right?
Yeah. But, you know, as clinicians and as coworkers and colleagues, we're treating people who have all sorts of different views, right? So are you going to say, well, wait a minute, I'm only going to treat people who share a view, right? I don't think anyone would do that. So, you know, they're there for treatment for a certain reason. You're there to provide treatment for a certain reason. There's really no deviation from that in my mind. So stay focused, you know.
Allan, how many docs do you think you worked with over the last 25 years?
In what capacity?
You know, just, you know, interfacing, sales, marketing, meetings, them reaching out to you. I'm just using a round number. Let's say it's 10,000. I mean, 5,000. I have no idea. I was going with a different question. I was going to say, what are the commonalities of people that are reaching out to you or getting engaged?
They're inventors, right? Yes. They have an idea. Yes. They have an idea, and I have a little show and tell because I thought we might end up on this one. So I have, you mentioned it, a patent. So if you were to kind of look at this picture, which isn't great, but it's just a post-op dressing, right? And the observation was, okay, you have some type of surgery, any kind of surgery. And I asked this question to the University of Miami healthcare marketing folks. I said, imagine that the dressing goes on and nobody can see your incision. And the instructions at the facility are, don't touch it. Don't touch it, because if you touch it, it might get infected. Leave it alone. It was placed on in the operating room. Right. How would you feel? And then you could see a bunch of heads go, oh, I don't know. I don't feel comfortable with that. I would like somebody to look and tell me everything's okay. So that was sort of the insight, that we have this disconnect between clinicians wanting to see it and violating protocol, and patients feeling like somebody should see it. So I came up with this idea, and I worked with a fellow at R&D, and we came up with this, which is OpSite Post-Op Visible.
Beautiful.
And it allows you to put a dressing on, incisions drain. So the feeling was it couldn't just be a transparent film, because you get a lot of exudate buildup and maceration. So it had to be absorptive in some way. And then this was a nice story that was in the UK paper, and it was about this little boy who ended up receiving product.
Oh my gosh, that's great.
Yeah. So if you say, boy, you know, was it worth it? What was my driver to leave practice? It was like, I enjoyed helping patients. I really did. I liked talking to them and doing things that I could to help them, but I could help the people that came to me. That's who I could help. But my role in Smith and Nephew, I could help more people. And by being part of an organization that believed in that product and did all the things necessary to make it available globally, I help a lot more people. And that's a podiatrist, right? So don't think, don't be too hard on us. This is for the audience. If you're a podiatrist and think that there are limits, I don't know. I did that. That came out of the brain of a podiatrist and somebody very smart in R&D. So that's who the docs, they come to me often because they have an idea and they don't know how to progress it. Or they have it that they've progressed to a certain point, but then they have a belief that I've come so far, I will now expect a large company to take it, pay me a lot of money for it, and then develop it and go prove it can be used by clinicians and patients and sold. And there's a lot of educating I need to do of that's not really how it works.
Right. I live that myself a little bit, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of blue sky, what ifs, and then a lot of companies want to acquire once it's already got some track record and proven, right?
They do. That's very important. I'm sure your idea is fantastic and your PowerPoint looks great, but let's see if people can actually use this. And then there's this issue I mentioned, due diligence, and part of that is patents, IP, intellectual property.
You took the words right out of my mouth. I love it. Go for it.
And that's also something that can be really heartbreaking if somebody comes up with a great idea and they don't have the wherewithal or the money to go and do freedom to operate. These are all things I've learned on the inside of companies, right? And do you even have the rights to produce the thing that you're showing me?
So I have a question for you. When these young docs come to me, or practitioners or residents, and I oftentimes will say, you know what, I kind of got started doing some provisional patents because you can do them cheaply and kind of use your space holder. Do you recommend that to young inventors?
Sure, because you can do it, but it doesn't, I'm not an IP attorney, right? In my mind, it doesn't mean much. It's just like, as far as I understand it, you're sending a notification to the patent office that starts a clock and it gets a date stamp. Right. And it kind of says, if anybody else comes up with this after me, I am on record as coming up with it at this point in time. But other than that, it doesn't really, there's still a lot of work that has to be done.
Yeah, you're just buying yourself a little time.
Yes.
Until you start forking over.
It's something. It's better than nothing.
Absolutely.
How much better than nothing? I'm not sure.
There you go. All right. Fair enough. Hey, shifting gears, I wanted to ask you about your educational experience. What you would tell a prospective undergraduate about podiatric medicine? What would you say?
Wow. It has changed so much. I don't know that I'm a good person to give that advice, because now, when I came out, I don't know that you needed a residency. We were talking before about when I graduated and had a diploma, I could sit for my Florida licensing exam, which I did. I don't believe that's the case anymore. You have to, what is it? Is it a 3-year requirement now? Or?
Yep. Now everybody does a 3-year medicine and surgery requirement.
Right. So I would just say, understand it. Understand what you're getting into. It's a long road, and understand where it could lead. I speak to a lot of people who are sort of like you, right? They didn't just do podiatry hands-on care. They have other interests, other skills, other capabilities. And that's really my message. My message is you're going to blink. And when you blink, it's 20 years has passed. What did you do with that 20 years? And did you have fun doing it? Did you do all the things that you wanted to do? Because if you're putting limitations on, they're self-imposed. Chances are you can do a lot. You've done a lot. You have a lot of interests. If you went through college and got into podiatry school, finished that, and did a 3-year residency, you're pretty capable of doing a lot. So even if it means you have to go and learn something, you're capable of doing that. Do what interests you.
Well, I brought this up because we had talked earlier, and you said, I'm glad, people wanted to encourage you to stay in your lane. But if you just stay in your lane, you don't reach out and find those possibilities.
You don't. And I just know back when I was in residency, we had our own operating room because we were not allowed in the main operating rooms by the head of surgery.
Oh, At the VA in Miami?
Mm-hmm.
I did not know that.
We had our own operating room. So, there can be an extreme of stay in your lane means, treat these types of patients and not others. I was never a big fan of the stay in your lane concept. I was, let's find the path and let's go, make it. And let's go figure out how to do it. And why not me? Somebody else did it. Why not me?
Absolutely.
So that's what I would encourage, is go out there and do it. And so those are the types of people. You ask, who do I meet? I meet the people who kind of have that mindset of, I want to go do something else. I was just at a conference, and Sarah Heller, who was on,
yeah.
Right.
She was one of my students when I was the dean in Miami.
Right. And look, she went on and she was on the TV show and she was there. And I know a doctor who mentored her. So I don't know her, but I went up and I just said, I saw you and I know somebody who mentored you, and he's always speaks so highly of you. But there's an example of somebody else who kind of didn't stay in their lane, and how great, that is.
Absolutely. Well, one of the exciting things about bringing you onto Dean's Chat is you've been exposed to that world of possibilities. And I think over the last less than an hour, we've really discussed a lot of that. And Allan, I appreciate you taking the time to come on Dean's Chat. And I'm not opposed if you're willing to come on down the road, because I love patent talks, product talks, opportunity talk.
Absolutely. And then listen, if anybody wants to reach out to me and say, what do I do? We've just discussed it. LinkedIn, right? You can reach me there. And
so Allan Freedline on LinkedIn. Any other? You have a website? I know you have a new consulting company, right?
I do. I have a new consulting company, so I'm helping. There's a lot of companies out there that they have great ideas, interesting technologies, limited resources sometimes, so they don't want to make the wrong steps. So a lot of it is, where is our time, effort, money best spent from my perspective? So yeah, just AllanFreedline @gmail.com, and AllanFreedline. You can reach me there. But I'm about, and if I'm at a conference that somebody's at, happy to meet with you, whatever I can do to help, whatever I can share. And I always say, don't take my advice. I'll just share with you what I think and what I know, but then it's up to you to figure out if you agree with it and if it's right for you.
Absolutely. Well, thank you on behalf of our profession for, you've paved a new road for our profession in that space with medical devices and Smith & Nephew. I give you a lot of credit for that.
Well, I do appreciate the fact that Smith & Nephew recognized that podiatry was important, because back when I joined, who was doing wound care at the time? WOCNs. Right? Their name, wound ostomy continence nurse, and they were being handed the wound care responsibilities. And then other medical specialties came in, and certainly podiatry was amongst them. So the fact that I was welcomed by a large company to have a big, voice in a lot of the decision making was fantastic. And I always did treat it as if I am a representative of podiatry, right? And this is what podiatrists can do, and this is what we know. So the more you talk to us, the more good information you'll get. So.
Absolutely. Well, again, Allan, thank you so much for joining me. I'm traveling on the road. I usually show you a little Dean's Chat cup that I would give you. We're going to mail one to you, because I know you're going to be on the phone.
Will you be in Dallas?
I will be in Dallas in 2 weeks. I will.
Why don't you hand it to me?
I'll bring it in person. Sounds good. Yeah. All right. Thanks again, Allan.
All right. Thank you so much for having me.
You bet. Well, to all of our listeners out there, if you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, thank you so much. Please leave a comment or give a 5-star rating. And if you're watching on YouTube, by all means, become a subscriber. I'm hoping to get a little better lighting next week when I'm back in my studio. But until next week, everybody, cheers. Bye-bye.